Welcome to this episode of the Sounds Like Sustainability webinar. This is a conversation that I'm having pretty much every month, representing the IECA, the International Environmental Communication Association. And sustainability is one of those terms that we discuss a lot. It's somehow everywhere. It's sometimes described as an empty signifier and being wicked for sure. So therefore, it's definitely worth to have these conversations and think and debate critically what sustainability means, why it is communicated in very different ways, and what the potential impact is on the society and what we call socio-ecological transformation. I'm absolutely delighted to have Professor Peter Dobers here in this conversational space, and warm welcome to you, Peter. And before you introduce yourself a bit more, I would love to start with asking you, is there a specific sound in your surroundings around you that you can hear, that you share with us, and that you somehow relate or connect to sustainability?
Well, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for allowing me into this pod or talk, and that's very exciting. I'm thinking of the sound of sustainability. Well, you reached me today from downtown Stockholm in Sweden, and I am living in an apartment with 5 others right now. Currently, we are a family of 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we don't have a car. So we don't have a car because infrastructure in Sweden, in Stockholm in particular, is quite well established. Of course, we have delays and sometimes trains not coming and little snow falling or leaves falling and everything is in ruin. But what I maybe unexpectedly would like to bring as a sound of sustainability, providing me the ample opportunity of not traveling by car to my university, is the sound of commuter trains or a subway, because it enables thousands, tens of thousands of people of traveling in a more sustainable way and commuting by public transportation instead of going by car, or of course going by bike and walking is much better, but I can't with 18 kilometers, or I choose not to bike.
Recording in progress.
So that is a sound, and it is. I'm also influenced by that because when I was the dean of the faculty board at Södertörn University for 6 years, we were actually also for the academic celebrations working on the sound of the university. So what's the sound of Södertörn University?
Okay, now I'm curious.
Yeah, and there were musicians involved, and they were composing the sound of Södertörn University, and parts of the sounds were, key punches on keyboards, and I think also old typing machines, because they sound more than our keyboards. But there were also the sound of accelerating and decelerating commuter trains, of opening and closing of their doors. And I commute by commuter trains 24 minutes each direction, so I have that sound daily. But composed with rhythm, with cello, with music, was also a very nice experience. So that is the sound that I bring today to the table of the sustainability, sound of sustainability, subway doors opening and closing, acceleration.
It's funny because, like, whenever we have these conversations, and whenever I ask people for the sounds, I always try to figure out, okay, where am I now very personally, what is the surrounding I'm sitting in? And in fact, this time I thought about the trains which are running outside, and we're in the very same situation, having 4 kids, having no car in Vienna, in an urban scenario where public transport is amazing, but of
Mhm.
course related to a lot of different sounds that tell me, yep, we're doing the right thing here. But by the same time, it is a very intense sound and comes along with a lot of, yeah, question marks sometimes as well.
Right, and it is also having the flip coin side of being stressful at times, being impossible to enter the trains and taking the subways because there are some delays, or the so-called accidents sadly happening. And
Awesome.
yeah, so that's well, a sound that goes with city urban life, and uh, it is seemingly one place of sustainability to be in, urban places. That's what
Yeah.
scholars, that's what people say as well. But I do also love the countryside and the archipelago of Stockholm. For the newcomers here, I talk from Stockholm, and we have a lovely archipelago outside of Stockholm, and there
Mm.
you also have great opportunities of sounds that are great and sounds of sustainability. But today it is the sound of subways and
And the
commuter
urban,
trains.
well,
Yes,
urban life as a
yes,
place, or the
yes.
city as a place for sustainability. I love that, and we will definitely come back to that. For now, I would love to kind of give everyone in this room now the chance to know a bit more about you, what you do, yeah, with I think a lot of different hats on. And one is that you are a professor at Södertörn University, and the other kind of former hat, as I learned, is from a wonderful sustainability related network of not just academics, but also people who work on very kind of practical aspects of communicating about and for sustainability. So maybe you say a few words about yourself and how you would like to introduce you to this discussion, and then we jump right into talking a bit about sustainability, what it is,
Mm.
and why we definitely should talk about leadership for sustainable development.
Right, right. Um, I I want to mention two scholars that I had the luck of coming across. One was the 33-year-old professor starting out at university in northern Germany, where when I graduated, or when I had graduated from the
Mhm,
German School of Stockholm, could start studying at
mhm,
Nordische Universität, the Nordic University,
mhm.
which was only in existence for 3 years. Then it collapsed somehow.
Okay.
It was political circumstances that made this impossible. But it turned out that he later would become my Doktorvater, my supervisor for my PhD. He recruited me to the first, as a first PhD student to the business school in Gothenburg at Gothenburg University.
Mhm,
Name is, or was, unfortunately, he has passed away with 60 years old only, or
mhm,
65, Rolf Wolf.
mhm,
And he was an academic entrepreneur. So he
mhm,
started these things. He provided excellent opportunities for scholars and senior, really bright professors to come together and do important research. And this was, we are now talking 92 when I got accepted to the PhD program. And it was the first one linking business studies with environmental, at that time, environmental
mhm.
issues
Okay.
that, juxtaposed my academic existence in a way, because when publishing in that area during the 90s, of course, I was well prepared for the first chairs coming up in
Mhm,
Sweden. In 2005, I landed a chair in Mälardalen University, and
mhm,
now since 10 years, I'm at Södertörn University. I have moved a bit into being the administrator, so to speak, having been dean of the faculty board at
mhm,
2 universities for in all 9 years. So I kind of like that opportunity of reaching out, opening up opportunities for others. And sustainability has always been at my interest in my personal
Mhm.
life as in academia. And I try to promote that in whatever position I happen to be in. Right now, I am the head of department for journalism.
Mhm.
I just wanted to allow myself to emerge in that opportunity as well. And journalism is so important for, as you may understand, of course, for an open society, for a democracy that is functioning. And of course, they want to prepare students for sustainability challenges, for writing about it, for understanding how to do that as well.
Mhm.
And I guess they are, in a way, experts of communicating a message as well, right,
Mhm.
in their different genres. That's
Yes.
extremely interesting to getting to know my 18 colleagues in a completely new field.
Mhm.
My business studies colleagues are somewhat angry at me for, don't tell them, for being with a journalist, but it's great. It's okay. And
Mm.
it's great. It's fun.
Cool.
And that's
Um,
just one way of grasping a few things in the moment.
mhm.
Mhm.
I love that as a starting point because I know that um, some people in this room now have studied communication, public communication, media studies, and I personally am a journalist by training, so I
Oh,
love hearing this perspective and. Um, the main topic here is sustainability, what it is, and not just from a terminological point of view, but also how it is co-constructed through communication. And the media do play a key role in telling us certain stories and giving us an idea of what sustainability is. But, and this leads me to the question, is there actually a lot about sustainability or communication about sustainability in the media? Because if we look at the media, we can see this massive dominance of this story about the climate crisis, which is good because it was very different 10 years ago. But by the same time, I don't see that much on sustainability, what it is, kind of reflections or critical reflections on, hey, there's a long story to this, there's a big story to that. It's about transformation, what it means, kind of broken down to cities, local places, and very individual life perspectives. So my question is like working with those journalism researchers and probably having like they are sharing their ideas about the media and what journalism can do and should do in this scenario we're in at
mm.
the moment. What is your kind of idea or your perception of sustainability in the public sphere, in the media? How is it dealt with? What are conflicts?
Well, I tend to consume media from United States, from Germany, and from Sweden.
Mhm.
And you could really see and tell, depending on what media outlet you
Mhm.
prefer, that it is a huge difference in a way how things are communicated. I think what is somewhat missing is the alternative story of the positive sides of the flip coin of constraining, of reducing consumption, of degrowth, or everything else that comes with a sustainable lifestyle, I guess. And I hear and read too seldomly about the positive side. So we are not good at communicating the upsides of possibly inner growth rather than material growth that we can take paths in. We know for certain that things need to change. That's what science tells us, and of course we are in the business of trusting in science, don't we? And
Sure we do.
some countries play down that and attack media in a way that is not nice, and therefore different stories come about, and we experience that now for the next 4 years from a main side from United States, of course. I mean, and it affects also the way media in Europe reports, and also how the political systems in Europe tend to change.
Mm.
But yeah, I miss the positive stories. I miss, and that's hard. How can we find that? I miss that also in the politics, in the political party landscapes.
Mm.
There are parties that should be good at that, and um, well, at least it is not majority worthy at the
Mm.
moment, it seems, and
Mm-hmm.
things come down to a majority in politics. If you don't have a majority behind major changes, then it won't take
Mm-hmm.
place. So we will be late into sustainability.
So I know that um, you also kind of think about why communication isn't considered in the SDGs a bit more, and how, like, if you look at how it is at the moment, if you feel like, oh, there is a lack of positive stories, there's a lack of alternative stories and
Hmm.
alternative narrations of what is happening. Um, how can, like, what are the big barriers? What are the big challenges, and how can they be potentially tackled?
I think when listening to two basic voices in terms of sustainability, one voice telling you, well, you just can continue living like you do, and we will not impose on your lifestyle with burning fossil fuel on one side, and the other side of, well, the alternative path to reduce fossil fuel in transportation, for instance, would be possibly to electrify things very quickly. And that brings about new infrastructure, and new infrastructures tend to be a bit more expensive in the very beginning. And well, maybe if we need, if we are well enlightened, and know the science in sustainability, and we know that we need to pay attention to reducing fossil fuel, then we may be willing to pay a bit more to certain things, or reduce the travel and all the rest of the things that may come with a sustainable lifestyle. And when you present this to the majority of people who are not academics into sustainability in one way or another, which most are not, then it is hard to not
Mm-hmm.
succumb to the easy way of not doing something right now in life, of
Mm-hmm.
not having to do it when growing up, when looking into the first apartments, or when just having another 10 or 15 years before retirement. Why should I reduce my life to less when people tell me, or where politicians allow me to continue? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
not only a matter of individual choices and affordability, but also about system-wide politics in terms of enabling us to take somewhat burden upon us, as well as the
Mm.
society take burden upon itself.
I love the term enabling. Um, so I know there are probably hundreds and more things that enable us, and you talked a bit about kind of inner growth instead of material growth, for example. Um, do we potentially need different kind of, or more pioneers, more people that inspire on an individual level. Um, are there different choices, or I don't know, this inner growth, or tell people kind of different stories? You know, like one thing is to blame the media. Why are they so selective and focus on that or this? And we can kind of take economic or political pressure into account and talk about the big discourses. But then we can kind of bring it back to the people who study journalism, or the kind of different communicator roles that are out there, and on an individual level. What do you think? Who is it that we need to inspire what is not happening? More communication, different stories that are told.
Hmm.
Is it the journalists predominantly, or are there other pioneers, change agents?
Well, let me take the opportunity to tap into the experience of when I was trying to get hold of a few keynote speakers for a 2022 conference in Stockholm.
Mm-hmm.
You may be aware of uh, uh, a United Nations conference taking place in Stockholm in 1972. It's not so well known in a way, but since living in Stockholm, we know, of course, of it. It was
Mm-hmm.
the first United Nations Development Conference, and it was dealing predominantly about water. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
water conference. And it was also then when our Prime Minister Olof Palme at that time was talking about that we should end ecocide.
Mm-hmm.
Ecocide is the
Mm-hmm.
um, massive destruction of ecology,
Mm-hmm.
and that this should be regulated on an international, global, paranational level. And 50 years after that, we are not so much further yet. But based on that conference, we knew that United Nations would have some kind of conferences, Stockholm plus 50, I believe it was called in the end, in Stockholm. So we wanted to have this uh, sustainability conference within the group of the network ISDRS, International Sustainable Development Research Society, that has annual conferences around the world. And when arranging for that, I talked also with funding agencies. I wanted to promote at that conference, just as I did in 2007 when I arranged this conference in Västerås. I wanted to lure others into sustainability that had not yet discussed so much in their science basis. 2007, it was health issues and social issues, the social side. So we were looking at health issues at that time. In 2022, being at Södertörn with strong humanities, I wanted to focus on art and culture, human rights, and courage. So those were key words of that conference. So art and culture. And there is a family foundation in Sweden, the Robert Whale Family Foundation, who is much into art funding, art sponsoring. And I had a chat with them in 2020, I believe. Pandemic had just hit, and I had got this contact in the end and told them what we wanted to try to do, and they said, "Well, we are already funding a center, so we can't fund you, but we can open doors to a few people. If you would like, you could talk to this guy." And I said, "Oh, great. Yeah, I would definitely like to talk to him." Jakob Trollbeck is the person, and you've probably never heard of him. I had not at that time either. But Jakob Trollbeck is used to be or was the leader, the inventor, the founder of a company called New Division. And New Division was a PR design company based in New York
Mm-hmm.
that were given the opportunity in 2013-14 to be discussing what United Nations was about to create. Something had to come after the millennial goals.
Ah.
And they are the firm that in the end came up with the brilliant symbols, the brilliant short abbreviations of on poverty, on hunger, no poverty, and all the rest of the very small, powerful, visual, powerful, communicative, translatable in all countries, in all languages of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and it's 169 sub goals target.
Mm.
And I really think that that is, and maybe I was a bit lengthy with the introduction, but that is a great example of communication skills, of understanding what science is about, but also bringing it to the point. It's so hard for us to have short titles, you know.
Mm.
Uh, there are so many articles that are important behind each and every one of these, and just to come down, boil down to these things with the color schemes, with the boxes, with the ring, everything is just brilliant.
Mm.
So I got in contact with him and I asked him, would he like to come to this conference and talk about, the background behind the SDGs? It would
Mhm.
be great. I mean, I haven't heard of it, so it would be lovely to share that with the
Mhm.
people. So at the Stockholm School of Economics was the time slot. We did the conference with 5 other universities. And he
Mhm.
said, Peter, great, thank you. Of course, yeah, I'd love to do that. But I can only come if I can also talk about what I am currently, and we're talking about 1920, what I'm
Mhm.
currently involved in, you know?
Mhm.
And he said, the SDGs, and I mean, he developed the thing and I don't, it's my words, maybe he was fed up with
Mhm.
SDGs, but he also understood the limits of the SDGs. He has lived with that, basically lived and seen how it was communicated
Yeah.
so successfully. And he said, well, this is the playing field. This is the frame. And he had this analogy to a soccer field. It's the soccer field, but there is no space for players here. How do we, as individuals, as working people, as human beings, relate to this set of 17 Sustainable Development Goals? So he and others have come up with a set of 23 skills, a skill set with 5 categories of skills that make this link, that enable us to view ourselves in our lives and see what are the skills that I need to practice upon. And this is a thinking that is, of course, very obvious and very close to university life. What's the skill set for our students? What's the skill set for executives that we teach, etc. And it's the inner development goals.
Mhm.
You may have heard of it, and
Yeah, I did.
there is the critique of them, of course, of being a bit
Mm.
elitistic, and you can argue whether there should be a 24th and a 25th skill, and if the categories should be 5 or 4 or 6. These things can be discussed, and since this is again not basically research based, but generally speaking, uh, good knowledge and a bit of wisdom and a bit of common sense, I am still quite uh, appalled by it. I really like the current idea. And I'm linking that in my own wording to the idea of inner growth instead of material growth. I once wrote a piece, maybe my most forgotten piece. You know, some academics have pieces they think are brilliant, but no one cites them, and they just are forgotten. But I from 1999, I wrote a piece on dematerialization.
Mhm.
I thought that was brilliant. dematerialization. We need to get away from resources.
Mm.
I think there was this one, it's a German term or a German scholar. You had this factor 4 and factor 10 during the 90s, and dematerialization was another way of putting it, to reduce resources. And we wrote about scenarios for industries. And the scenario that we put up for the car industry, this was in Gothenburg, and Volvo was then a big industry in Gothenburg. Then, of course, dematerialization is a thing, not selling cars, but renting them, or carpools, or even electricity was on the on in the article. We were pointing out that a company like Volvo might turn into more financial services, which we see today. They earn more on leasing their cars than selling their cars, and these kind of things. So, um, that article talks
Mm.
about dematerialization. So inner growth, inner development skills, inner development goals, I think can help us thinking in the right term,
Mm.
with a bit of reflection around it as well.
I love that, and I started to work with it and look at it, and I think there are two levels on which the IDGs are really inspiring, for a scholar doing academic research, but by the same time teaching. One is exactly what you said. It's the level of like skills and competences that we want the students to experience, to learn, to grow into. And of course, the other way is to look at it as a researcher. And I do this from an internal communication perspective. What does it do for organizations? And how important is it to realize that organizations can be the facilitator for inner growth? But this is potentially a different topic. What I want to ask you, kind of as a last question before I want to open this discussion to everyone who's here, is when we think about the IDGs as you said, skills or competences, even if the terminology is tricky. But if we think about it from this way, I know that there's a master program at your university, and you can talk about it, which is Leadership for Sustainable Development.
Mm-hmm.
And I have two questions. Like, one is, how do you actually embed those competences and skills in a program? Does this somehow impact the pedagogies that are chosen, the didactics, the tools of the teaching itself? And the second question is, what are those professional roles that the students who are in this program think that they will work in?
Mm-hmm. No, it's very good questions. When there is a social science-based 2-year master's program called Leadership for Sustainable Development, scholars, students from sociology, economics, and business studies can take part in those specializations. We have national intakes and we have international intakes. The program came about, or started being developed, in 2016, 2017. And I tell you this background because at that time, when looking out in Europe for 2-year master's programs in sustainability, they were basically all of them, but an exception here and there, environmental science-based masters. So we really had an argument for providing something that is social science-based. And at that time, I had moved into being a dean of the faculty board. I had to withdraw a bit from this development because I just didn't have the time. And my colleagues developed this in a way. And this was before the inner development goals came about. Of course, leadership is based not only on individuals, but also on group thinking. Group thinking in terms, not the term of group thinking of being blind, but that leadership is going about in a group of people, and it is a performative activity that is brought by a team, by a group of people. Leadership is not individual, leadership is collective. And there are certain skills that you could say relate to the inner development goals coming up later. When discussing about the inner development goals, actually yesterday and 2 days ago with colleagues at Uppsala University on Gotland, we were talking about that. They have a 1-year program. They start, and I think they do it brilliantly. They start by also in their introduction course, their masters, their 1-year master is only for business studies. So it's more simple in a way, but they start from the individual, from the person. And I think that gives the teachers and students alike much more opportunities of building the community of students, being together for 1 year. Their program is only those students going that master's program. Our program is also enrolling other students who just pop in for a course because there is a master's in sociology, and second year students can choose the introductory course where we are looking into on the micro, meso, and macro levels of sustainability and organizations, individuals, groups. So it's a completely different opportunity by which those skill sets are not geared as I maybe would like today. So I'm a program coordinator. We are talking about changes that we may undertake, and this could be one way to go to link it more clearly to the individual. But then again, we also have students from economics and from sociology, and they just are tuned to more macro levels than individuals in a way. So it's actually, I asked them yesterday, what, so, let me ask you, professors of sociology, what do you start with leadership? I mean, what's leadership for you? What's leadership for those in economics? It's tricky, but they don't view that word so important as we may do, or as business scholars may do, or organizational scholars, but they view the leadership master with a social science basis. That's their thing, and that's what they think is important. But I think we should be talking much more about those skill sets, and I just read them out a bit. Being, relating to yourself, that is very good at what Uppsala does or do. Thinking of cognitive skills, that's probably what we are also good at universities. We should be. But relating, starting a course or a program by talking about how we can relate to other qualities, to other parts, relating to nature, to animals, etc. I think that is also important for thinking what leadership can be and should be about, of collaborating, of acting as well, enabling change, of being the change agents that we talked about in the very beginning. So the change agent part is something that we will bring out more clearly in the program description of the program. So that is one thing that this discussion is somewhat laying the foundations for, and thoughts that came from the discussions yesterday that I had. So we are trying to have students relate to other aspects than only science. We do that, or have tried that, that we are reading novels together. And we had this one book about how it is being lonely in New York. And it was surprisingly suited for students, because they were actually, some of them, realizing how sometimes they felt lonely coming from Asia, Africa, South America to Stockholm to study this leadership masters, that they brought or left their families, and that they are also somewhat lonely sometimes. So it was a great book that explained or described loneliness through the biographies of three artists, Andy Warhol, Dennis Hopper, and David Wojciechowicz, or something like that. Close to the Knives, he has written a book on that. Some kind of the 80s blank generation fascination for uh, um, trying out different sexual identities in order to explore their art and the way they would like to express themselves. Anyway, so we should relate to other aspects than only science, and that is also something that is inspired by the inner development goals, I believe. And some of those goals, the learning outcomes, as we talk about them in the university settings, are sometimes part of courses and sometimes not. So the communicative aspect, as you say, when developing the program, just let me relate to that for a second. When developing the program, we had external funding for 1 year to talk with people, sustainability leaders from from business organizations, from the public sector, from the civil society. And what they were very keen, what is the skills that you would like from someone studying leadership for sustainable development? And they said, well, they must be able to communicate very well. So having students present a lot is part of our program. And this is sometimes more a challenge than expected. Because although we say, you have English skills barrier, you need to know English and everything is very important for you to be able to go through the studies. We also are a kind of universities in the south part of Stockholm, outside of Stockholm, where we're situated. We are a young university. We don't have the most prestigious students coming from most prestigious bachelor programs throughout the world, but we also have students that fight to survive in a way, that don't have fundings from home, but they need to work for paying the tuition fee. We have 21 students last fall accepted and coming to us that are paying students. And sometimes they are not as strong in their communicative skills as we had hoped them to be. So we have a different task there. It's not only the very best communicators that we have, but when relating to the challenges that they can bring the knowledge from this 2 year masters and what it means to be living in Europe for 2 years is, I believe, we are very grateful if they can bring that knowledge and they can bring their inner voices to their home countries and develop and take on leadership positions there
Awesome.
as change agents, as you so
Yeah.
nicely put it in the very beginning.
Yeah. I would love to open the floor now for questions from everyone who's here today. I'm very grateful to have so many people interested in this conversation today. So I think there was so much to hook in and to ask more questions. Please, everyone who's here, just ask questions as we go. Gabor, I can see you unmuted, so I feel like, yep.
You went for the cues of communication. Yes, thank you. So just a little bit of context. I'm an associate professor at the University of Roehampton in London. And last week I attended a symposium, and I want to briefly share my experience and ask a question at the end. It was a symposium basically for business schools around embedding sustainability into the curriculum. And obviously, most of the curricula that we saw were focusing very much on the business interpretation of sustainability and financial sustainability and so on, which I personally, with a background in sociology and economics, I challenge very much, and I really believe that looking at financial sustainability only will not work. And what came up with that the truly successful programs seem to be the ones which are really interdisciplinary at their approach, which means that students in the program, be it a 1 year or 2 year masters or some of the bachelor programs, it only works if they have the possibility to look at this very complex issue from various angles, from legal, from life sciences, from business, and so on. But then, and this is the question, but then it runs into a situation where from each of these subject areas, you can only offer and expect students to learn a relatively limited amount of knowledge, because you cannot be specialist in a field if you're focusing on 3-4 different fields. So how would you overcome this? Or is this a real challenge, or it's not really a problem? What is your take on this?
Oh, definitely. It is important to look into and tap into other subjects, fields, other disciplines. I would say maybe this goes to different disciplines as well, but business studies or organization theory, which I more accurately belong to, is a subject that borrows from all great thinkers in sociology, in science and technology studies. I'm a big fan of Latour and Calon and Donna Haraway and etc. And they are not organization theorists in that sense. But you're precisely right that we need to allow our students also to learn about completely different perspectives. My contribution to this is and now I'm looking at a little piece just to get it right, is to arrange a PhD course from April to October that brings about the pluralistic perspectives on sustainability for doctoral students. And we have 6 occasions by which we, at the first occasion, talk about the Anthropocene and its critiques. We talk about, in the second opportunity, about power dynamics and the politics of delay, which is a nice sociology that we can see practiced in the United States right now. We have carbon accounting and commensuration. We have colonialism and anthropocentrism. We have petrocultures, and we have, of course, not-for-profit, degrowth, and values pluralism. And this is to give doctor students within the field of organization theory, management, public administration, these closely related subjects, industrial economics, industrial management, an opportunity to relate completely different thinkings that they don't normally get to their PhD subjects, their own studies. So we want them to relate and reflect upon, how does petroculture comment upon my interest? More probably than not, it will be PhD students that have some kind of sustainability interest, but they are supervised maybe by others that are surrounded by traditional scholars, in a sense, where they don't allow the periphery of the subject to tap into the other disciplines that there are. So I am certainly always on the fringes of subjects rather than in the bull's eye in the center of subjects, because I think that's where development take place. That's where we can challenge the center. That's where we can start drawing and making those boundaries fuzzy and fluid and permeable. Is that the word to say? Yeah. Like a Gore-Tex filter,
Okay.
allowing things to get out. But
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. So, it somehow connects to the last question. You were active in business and in journalism, and I would be interested whether sustainability is tackled somehow differently in those two areas, according to your experience.
Well, I'm only administrator in the sense that I help them with all the admin stuff. So I'm not the scholar of journalism right now, but the 2, 3 persons with their latest research interests, and of course, as a parenthesis, of course, they know uh, about my interest in sustainability, and I tackle them and lure them into that and have workshops on how we can contribute uh, to students being journalists in a society with critical accidents and critical situations, catastrophes, etc. And how do you report and how do you relate to that? Anyway, what they are studying, the 2, 3 persons there, is of course, for instance, small mining uh, um, um, fields in the southern parts of Sweden where we have the big lakes, and they are studying how resistance is being communicated, how they organize and communicate their resistance. That is, for instance, one research that I don't frequently find in business studies. I know that a previous PhD student of mine, she has been studying the oil industry in Albania, and she did that after she had been 5 years of a consultant for the oil industry. And then she said, enough is enough. Now I'm doing a PhD from the other perspective. So, of course, she was very keen on the power dynamics and the regimes of how you silence small voices of people living. Back to journalism, the second example is how issues around forestry and forest industry is communicated. So communication is a big part in this field, and the field of journalism, media technology, and media studies is split up in 3 different schools at Södertörn. For some reason, it happened to be like that. So we have media communication studies in the humanities department, we have journalism in the social science department, and we have media technology in the environmental and technology department or school. So those are 2 examples of what our scholars in journalism are conducting research on. And I would say they overlap definitely with what scholars in business studies could study. But more often than not, they take a different agency and focus on that, not the business perspective, but the others, those that are suppressed by business forces or by business interests, for instance. So I guess that critical management studies could be having a larger overlap with journalists in a way. I don't know how things are in the countries where you come from, in Austria and in England, but journalism in Sweden are very much attributed to being emancipatory, interested, being, if you are familiar with the scale of, right and leftish, they are rather more to the left side. The main media in Sweden is very much attacked by right-hand politicians as well, increasingly so, that we are a bit too leftish. And Södertörn University, as a university, has a reputation of, since we are a new university with a new edge of what we would like to do, that we are feeling that science and education is bringing us to becoming also change agents by what we do. we also have a reputation of sometimes being not serious or not to be taken seriously. But of course, we are a great university with great impact in scholarly perspectives and in our students.
Awesome. So maybe one very quick question, and then we will close this wonderful conversation. Is there any quick question?
I
Yeah.
have one.
Hi.
So I have a quick one. So I'm doing like a teaching project now. I'm from Media and Communication Science, but we are in a technical university. So we are designing now a new course with mechanical engineering. And we are thrilled. However, it is also quite challenging. We are not even starting teaching. We are still designing, and this is challenging to, so beautiful it is, the word interdisciplinary. We are even challenged when talking to the other professor in other department that totally a different field, engineering and communication science. And how, when you have a conflict in interdisciplinary teaching at the university, how you overcome that? You might have an expertise on that or experience.
No, I certainly not have an expertise in that, although I've been 5 years at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. But I really think that we need to start from understanding that people come from so different parts. And if you are planted in a technical university, the comfort zones of professors and teachers from engineering backgrounds, the comfort zones for students that normally study engineering in different ways, up ways and down ways and everything. And you talk about communications and media studies. You need to be aware of that. You need to bring them safely and securely into a comfort zone by which they can talk about what you would like to talk, you would like to teach upon.
Yeah.
So, and by that you could possibly avoid conflicts, not creating them, by taking it slowly and socializing.
Okay. Thank you.
I love this idea of creating comfort zones, because that is something that's definitely related to different disciplines and different understandings of how we do research, how we learn, and so on, and how we grow. But I love to bring in the space perspective in our thinking and see, like, how can we create those spaces for individual or inner growth, but also for kind of groups and disciplines and people kind of finding together under this umbrella. I think we could kind of talk on and talk on, talk on. I would love to, say, thank you so much, Peter. That was an amazing conversation. I was looking to my right side quite a bit this time. The main reason is that I made so many notes, and I know that there might be more questions. So if you don't mind, there might be someone sending you an email saying, like, oh my God, this is really interesting. Can we have another quick chat? Or maybe there's a question, if that's okay for you.
Please, that's fine. That's very good.
And
I really enjoyed the many questions and comments and thoughts of you as well. Thank you.
thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing all your experiences and your thinking, and also kind of weaving in this kind of historical development from the SDGs as a framework to the inner development goals. And I love that this was kind of happening somehow in the background and came up again and again. So thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. I will stop the recording now and say goodbye to everyone.